Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode number 106. I'm recording live on August 1st, 2017. I would like to thank Scott Smith of Recovering from Religion for the impromptu interview last week. After I talked to myself for 20 minutes about Secular Saturday, things turned out much better when I talked to other people, clearly. So check out Recovering from Religion, and if you have a few spare hours a month, volunteer for the helpline. So the current deep thought in atheist circles is that the community is dying and fracturing. If we ever wanted to just get along, by the way, that's not just going to happen with us. I can't say the community is in that bad of a space, considering that 2 weeks ago we had Secular Saturday in Chattanooga, and last weekend we had Gateway to Reason in St. Louis, featuring a non-murderer's row of speakers and attendees. One of those attendees was Thomas Westbrook, pretty avatar for the Holy Koolaid YouTube channel. If you have a believer friend or family member who wants an atheist issue explained with pretty pictures, head to Holy Koolaid, and welcome aboard, Thomas. Thanks for being on.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. You know, I could have beatboxed through the intro if you wanted.
Well, that'll be for next time. Maybe I'll have to say in the library, do that.
So you have the musical intro.
Well, that's my version of a musical intro. Everybody's got their, sometimes it's their own music, sometimes it's the stuff from GarageBand, but yeah, it's I sing because I'm live. So I have a second self Margarita Goza as the starter for the evening, and then the lovely Dogfish Head Sea Quench, a lime sour ale. It's light, it's summery, you know.
I have some water.
The finest fracking water from Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you would call it the finest, but I'm not going to diss Oklahoma. They've been pretty good to me since I've been here.
See, there you go. There you go. Well, I don't really have out of context quotes. I just have normal quotes, so I'll go ahead and throw them out here. The longer I'm out, the crazier it looks. If he was so great, a little scrutiny wouldn't change that. Asking how you can have an objectively moral framework without God is like asking how you can have an objectively good economic framework without the monopoly guy. So those are some of Thomas's greatest. So let's start with covering your show. So you have your YouTube show, which is a bunch of awesome animations. So what was kind of the elevator speech for Holy Koolaid?
Well, I am a skeptic, humanist, atheist who makes laser-focused videos, animated, and I try to take a really complex issue in either philosophy or science and do a whole ton of research on it, break it down in a way that's easy to understand, and put it out there for you guys. Because ultimately, I believe that truth withstands scrutiny, and I see lots and lots of manipulative, controlling organizations, whether it's an authoritarian government, an abusive relationship, a religious institution, or any other group that tells you don't ask questions, flag. And I think if they are so wonderful and perfect, it'll withstand any kind of scrutiny you throw at it. So we shouldn't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to come out as often as it should. Some shows do it, but to do the whole check your work. I always say check my guests' work because they're the ones doing all the talking. So that's always nice for me. So how did your show get started? And did you just from the start go, clearly animation, got to go that way?
My first 3 videos weren't animated, and I just had a green screen behind me, and I was trying to figure out how to get that to work. And I had some really deep questions and struggles and issues, and I was kind of at that point I already identified as an atheist, but I wasn't really out to my family, and I wanted to have a way that I could, have these conversations without being interrupted and cut off in the middle of a really deep philosophical question that I would have. And so it started off just kind of a couple videos here and there, and then when it started to become more popular, I realized I could turn it into a full-time thing, or at least try and see how it goes in a year's time.
So is there like a regular frequency to them, or does it depend on what you're talking about?
It's a weekly show. I put out a video every single Saturday. The exact style varies a little bit because some of my more science heavy videos take me a good month to do all the research. And, if I'm not, for example, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I love that field. So I might spend a month just buried in, research papers on near-death experiences and what we know and what we don't know about NDEs. And then I try to break that down and make a video out of it. Now, if I'm just having a rant about something and I'm kind of ticked off that I'm hearing one particular argument from, the theistic camp, then I might spit that video together in a couple days and put it out there kind of in the meantime. And those tend to be more popular than the ones that I take a month doing. But I think it's because in those videos, I'm not afraid to kind of let loose and just, fire away at a particular dogmatic position.
Now, are you a fan of red wine? Because that's part of your kind of intro.
I do like to enjoy a glass of wine. I think with any kind of alcohol, it's best when it's complemented with some type of food. But the whole goblet is supposed to parallel the Last Supper. So like when Jesus says, "This is my body, this is my blood," and he's handing them this goblet, I'm kind of drawing a parallel between that and Jim Jones. So if you're not familiar with Jonestown, it was a cult, the People's Temple, where over 900 people drank Kool-Aid, or it was actually Flavor Aid, but the term "don't drink the Kool-Aid" came out of that. And it was laced with cyanide. And so they all it was this mass suicide. Some of them were forced to drink it, and it wasn't suicide. Some of them drank it willingly. And I think religion can be equally detrimental at times.
So the lesson there is, if you're going to do a mass thing like that, go for the generic brand, but you get the main brand, attached to it. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know.
I think if you're committing suicide, you can afford the extra couple bucks to go out the right way.
I don't know. That would be a very, very bad debate to have. It would go bad places. We're already heading bad places, so maybe we can go back. So you do an avatar of yourself. Do you feel like, when people meet you, do they say, "Hey, you don't really look like that"?
Well, people recognize my voice oftentimes before they recognize my face. Although, because I do come on my channel, I don't just have my, I physically appear in some of my videos. I don't just have my avatar in all of them. So people recognize me sometimes, but when I go to conferences, like I was at Imagine No Religion and I got up to ask a question, and after the question was when people came up and approached me because they're like, "Oh, I know that voice. That's the Holy Kool-Aid guy." But I think, I don't know, I guess I look a little different than my avatar, but it's because, I change my hairstyle. I shave sometimes, and I made the avatar about a year ago. But I tried to make it as close as I could. Maybe I'm just bad at picturing what I look like.
You covered it as like that. I remember the goatee part, just because I can't really grow facial hair. I'm just jealous. That's all. Don't worry about the jealousy.
It's just really light. So I could have taken it down a tent, but
podcast people, as usual, you're missing out. You're not getting the whole deal. So it was where it's at, well, for at least part of the show. So you've done some interviews. Do you have like a favorite, and do you have like some dream people that you want to get on and kind of make into their own avatars?
I would definitely like to interview Neil deGrasse Tyson at some point. That would be a lot of fun. I'd love to have Lawrence Krauss on the show. So far, I've interviewed Seth Andrews. That was a blast because I've been a fan of his show, The Thinking Atheist, for some time. I had Hemant Mehta on, Daryl Ray, and I think I did one other, Anthony Magnabosco. But I don't do a whole lot of interviews. I try to keep it, those kind of spread out. When I do, I'll do one like once a month, but a lot of times I have a particular topic or idea that I want to dive into. But in between, it's fun to bring other people on sometimes.
Now, perhaps this is too technical a question for the general listener, but I'm just intrigued by how you learned the animation and what you've been able to do with it, and what you're planning on doing it in the future.
Well, I really can't draw for crap, but I took there's an online tool. A lot of hardcore animators would say that it's cheating, but it's called Go Animate, and it has a whole lot of templates, and it makes the process super simple. And I have links to all of it. I have affiliate links on my website for, that they can go and download it, try out a free trial. But not that I'm trying to shamelessly plug, but since you're asking about the software, it's pretty easy to use, and they have pre-done animations and actions. But I'm actually looking at switching, maybe not for all of my videos, but there's a tool called, I think it's Adobe Character Creator, that comes with the latest version of After Effects, where you can do live animations. You have to do a whole lot of work ahead of time to create all the characters and the parts and the different actions and stuff. But then you can assign them to hotkeys and have it like follow your mouth and whatnot. So you're talking on cam. Like if I was talking to you right now, I would have just an animated character doing all the actions.
Also, like in a future interview, we could have that.
Oh yeah. If you have me on in like a month or so, then hopefully I'll have all that up and running.
Excellent. Well, since you're actually having to pay attention, clearly the question about whether you drink while producing your show is probably not going to be a yes, but maybe people could be encouraged to drink while watching or listening to your show.
My live videos, I don't do a whole lot of them, but they're a lot more free flow, organic. Just kind of whatever comes up. I try to have kind of a little bit of structure when I put out a live video, but most of my videos are heavily scripted and heavily edited because I don't like wasting people's time. And I think like a podcast, you can kind of just have that format just open and you go with it, and people are cooking dinner, they have it on in the background, they're listening to it, they're driving, and they kind of feel comforted by a familiar voice, a familiar style and layout. With a video on YouTube, there's a lot more, maybe there's a question that I'm asking and they want to know the answer. They want it in a concise format. They're a lot more ADD. They want, they don't want to have their time wasted. And I try to respect that.
See that you have pretty short videos on there. At least some of them
I try to keep it under 10 minutes most of the time.
Excellent. So do you like to rotate though between kind of the science ones and then maybe the religious questions?
Yeah, when I first started, it was exclusively religious. It was, how could a perfectly just loving God condemn people to hell for eternity? The punishment and crime aren't proportionate. Does religion kill curiosity? And as I've had the channel longer, it's not that these questions aren't important or that they aren't relevant, and I'm still going to be addressing them. But what led me away from my faith in the first place was when I fell in love with science, and I started learning all about evolution and the Big Bang and abiogenesis. And I love what I see happening as far as trends in Silicon Valley, when I see things like the smartphone that you have in your pocket, or that some Maasai warrior has, is thousands of times more powerful than the supercomputers that put man on the moon. And I see that and I get excited. I see all kinds of breakthroughs in technology, and I see the world becoming more united as languages are becoming a thing of the past once translation software improves. Currencies becoming a thing of the past with cryptocurrency, borders, and we have flight networks that are just thousands of planes, all countries are connected. Trade networks are bringing people together. We're becoming less violent, and that excites me. That gets me, wanting to make more videos. But there's definitely an elephant in the room when it comes to a lot of the religious. You'll see religions fighting against stem cell research, saying that evolution is a hoax and climate change isn't real, and these are coming from specifically the religious right most of the time.
Now, you mentioned earlier, did you say this is your full-time thing, or is it still kind of a hobby?
No, it's full-time. About 9 months ago, I used to work in an IT job at Texas A&M, and I figured, I'd quit my job, give it a shot, cash in my savings, sell my stuff, and try to see if I could make it work. And I've been traveling around, so I found, like right now, as soon as the summer's up, I'm going to the American Atheist solar eclipse in just a couple weeks now. But after that, I'm thinking of hitting up South America next. And what I do is I'll open up Skyscanner or Google Flights and just kind of, I'm feeling lucky. Where can I go? What's the cheapest flight? You know, and you can get to like Monterrey, Mexico for like $100. You can get down to like Buenos Aires for not too much. And then once you're there, the cost of living is a whole lot cheaper and you're able to stretch your funds out a lot further.
But do you have to take all your equipment with you then if you want to keep doing your show?
I pack really light.
So you're saying Oklahoma's not a long-term stay for you?
No, it's been nice. I've been here a couple weeks, other than Gateway to Reason, which I was just at this last weekend. But I get restless if I'm in one place for too long. There's a lot to see, a lot to do, a lot of places to travel, and you know, I'm not ready to settle down again for a little while at least.
I would say that you probably a couple weeks you got Oklahoma covered. You're probably doing okay there. They do some nice breweries there. Prairie's there. It's nice.
It's been good to me. There's a pretty decent size atheist community here in Tulsa, and I just talked at Disbelief Discourse in Oklahoma City on Islam, and that was a really awesome group there.
Cool.
But I think the most important thing in any place is the people.
That's true. I guess you got to reach out real quick when you're somewhere and figure out the lay of the land, right? And they're the ones who are going to tell you, where to go, where you're looking for. So can you talk about kind of your personal religious background? Because you have family that are missionaries in some former Russian, Mohammedistan kind of country, to be unnamed for
Muslim
reasons.
Country. I have a very religious background. I was a missionary kid for 14 years, came back to the States. Born in my parents were Southern. My dad was from Texas, my mom from Missouri. So I kind of have that in my blood. But I was born in Los Angeles, came back to the States, went to a private university in Texas for a year before transferring to A&M. But I did the whole gamut. I was a missionary myself for one semester. I was a church camp counselor. Two summers. I was a youth pastor. I led a church band, Christian fraternity. And at some point, I realized that a lot of this stuff isn't adding up. The more I read the Bible, the more I learned about science. I just saw too many inconsistencies and inaccuracies, and I wanted to go where the truth led.
Now, you mentioned on Beyond the Trailer Park that you've actually read the Bible in like multiple languages. So what was it like to read it?
I didn't read it cover to cover in multiple languages. So, I mean, I've studied it in English, and I actually took when I was about maybe 7 or 8, I started studying some Greek and Latin and kind of learned just like some roots and stuff. But a lot of times I would just pull up, when I was in college, I had like some biblical studies courses, and you can pull up online the Greek translation and the Aramaic or the English all side by side, and compare the words and go through certain more controversial passages and try to figure out what's the context. And so in that sense I have, but I haven't actually read the entire thing in Greek. If I don't want to mislead anyone.
Well, the parts where they name names for like 10 pages, you probably can pass that over. But who knows, man? There's some sneaky meaning to that.
I've studied some in Russian, but that's not the original,
Well, I don't really know. I guess since you're in the area, you might know the whole Eastern-Western break, like when it actually happened between, I guess, what was like Roman Catholicism and Eastern, which now sort of partially rules Russia.
Well, the Eastern Orthodox Church, initially the split was between Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul, and Rome, or the Catholic Church. But in Russia, they came down and kind of imported Orthodoxy from Constantinople, and that kind of became its own split. So you had like the Russian Patriarch. And so now you have, I don't know how much there still is in Turkey. I think now there's the Greek Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church. I don't know how much they really interact with each other anymore, though.
Probably not a ton. Yeah, there's so many splits to hear the story behind some of them is like, huh.
Well, and a lot of times it's over dumb stuff too. It's like, when you cross yourself, do you like have two fingers, or do you like do some weird, like does your thumb touch your forefinger? It's really dumb stuff. Sometimes it's a really important issue, like eternal salvation. Are we saved once for all time, or can we lose our salvation? I think that's a little bit bigger of a deal, but people tend to fight over stupid stuff.
Yes, it's a lot of religion and non-religion, and all that stuff. Now let me do this. We're about 20 minutes in, so I'm gonna do first live read. I'm gonna do short ones tonight because we got guests. Well, all guests are interesting, but never mind. Hashtag all guests matter. So if you want to catch up on what I'm up to, listen to last week's Scenic City Skeptics, in which I guest star by mostly audibly nodding because we all kind of agreed, and clearly we want to hear the story of Brian and Lexi getting engaged and the whole Secular Saturday kind of backstory. And a week from this Saturday, August 12th, I will be on the live one-year anniversary edition of the Podunk Polymath Cast. And I am saving a special beer, a Russian stout called Dirty Commie Heathen for that one. I'll start with that. We'll see where it goes after that. So you've been traveling a ton. Do you have like an official list of how many languages you can speak?
Right now, 3 fluently if you include English, but I'm working on Spanish. I tried picking up some Arabic and French, but I only know a few phrases in each. So I can't count either of those. But
so you haven't read the Quran, the original language?
No, I've just in English, but I do intend to at some point study more Arabic. But the style of Arabic I was studying was Egyptian Arabic anyways, which is different from classical Arabic. So if you take a Quran, and its traditional layout, you're gonna miss some. And people will say, oh, you didn't read it in the real Arabic. But the reason that I wanted to learn Egyptian Arabic is because that's kind of their media center, cultural center. A lot of movies come out of Egypt. And so a lot of surrounding languages, understand and speak Egyptian Arabic. Classical is a little bit more focal.
So is the Egyptian Arabic kind of like how anytime there's a science fiction movie or like Game of Thrones, we always have the characters defaulting to a British accent? Like it just sounds better. So I wonder if it sounds better, if it's just a more.
Well, I think it's a little bit more different than that. It'd be more like Old English. You'd kind of get maybe the gist of what they're saying, but you'd have to struggle even if you're fluent in the language already, because there's a lot of differences and the language has evolved. Pre-Shakespearean English, Yeah,
language is definitely. If people think evolution isn't a thing, they can check the language of a holy book compared to how people talk or read or write today. It's not really the same. But since you talked about traveling, you've recently traveled to Gateway to Reason. You will be the gateway for the audience who wasn't there to tell us what exactly it was like. I feel like this is a conference that's been going on for a while, and I know there were a lot of really great names there. Maybe you can talk about just what it was like being there and maybe some of the favorite people you saw.
Yeah, so I think this is only the second time that they've done it. The first time was 2 years ago, and then last year they had to cancel, unfortunately, but they brought it back, hit the ground running, and I think that Thomas True got some sponsors for it. And so he was able to pull it off. The speaker lineup was insane. There were like 30 plus speakers that they pulled in. They had everyone from the Unholy Trinity, which, if you're not familiar, is Seth Andrews of the Thinking Atheist podcast, R.N. Raw. He has the Raw Men podcast as well as a YouTube channel. And he's, I think, president of American Atheists, the American Atheist Texas, or maybe he's no longer. I don't remember. Don't quote me on that. And then you have Matt Dillahunty of the Atheist Experience. But in addition to that, there was David Fitzgerald, John W. Loftus, Mandisa Thomas. They had Emery and Heather Henderson of the Ardent Atheist podcast. and just a whole lineup of other people, a lot of interesting guests. Rebecca Vitzum, who was on CNN when I think it was Wolf Blitzer asked her, you know, are you thankful that to God that you survived some like tornado? And she was like, actually, I'm an atheist, on live TV. So, I mean, yeah, the speaker lineup was awesome. The one thing I would have kind of liked to have seen more of is there was a lot of lectures back to back, and there wasn't a whole lot of free time in the middle. So I get kind of ADD and bored if I sit too long. And so I spent a lot of time kind of in the lobby socializing with other people. But it would have been nice to have had a little bit more time, either more breaks in between or just some socializing events where you can kind of just hang out with people and talk and do stuff.
Now, did they have it set up where there were like multiple talks at the same time and you had to really decide who you wanted to see, or maybe trying to split up the hour or the time to see multiple people?
No, they actually, this is one of the longest conferences that I've been to, because they started on Friday morning. And so they went, you know, and I was surprised how many people came, you know, because a lot of times if Friday's a work day and it's the morning of, you know, how many people were able to make it out then. And then it went all the way through Sunday, and they had it all in one conference room. And so you would go into that room, and you'd had every speaker back to back. So if you wanted to, you could attend every single lecture. I personally have a hard time sitting through that much in a row. I can sit through lectures, but I start getting burned out.
So is it all day Friday through Sunday?
Yeah, they have. I think it goes normally until around like 8 or 9 or something. I forget the exact time the last lecture was, but then they would have, on Friday, they had a VIP dinner, and they had some entertainment and comedy and music and stuff. And that was fun. So it wasn't just lectures. They had like Shelley Siegel was there. They had Steve Hill did some comedy. I think they had David Smalley was there as well. He was doing some comedy. And then they also had Matt Dillahunty brought his full kit of magic. If you've never seen him do any of his magic tricks, that's a lot of fun.
That's a side of him that you don't often see, but that's one of his. I wouldn't even call it a hobby. It seems like he's pretty good.
You know, it's amazing how many people who are magicians also identify as atheists. People like James Randi, Darren Brown, Dillahunty, because they know that if you can be this easily fooled with some sleight of hand, some little trick or something, you know, putting it 2,000 years back and saying that some guy did it in the desert before the invention of video cameras doesn't exactly make it any more believable.
Yeah, they had like a pretty small kind of skeptics conference in Atlanta. I remember going to a few years ago, and it was more scientific skeptical, but they actually brought in like dowsing rods to show people what they look like, because dowsing rods are supposedly like these magical things that can find, it's kind of like a MacGuffin. It can find whatever you're really looking for. Like, oh, you're looking for, I think they actually sold some in Iraq that like they said they could find like explosive devices, and clearly they were fake, but just showing that like these things exist. And yeah,
it's like you might find the explosive device, but it's not going to cue you off ahead of time.
Yeah, you're probably going to find it no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the, let's say there's the Holy Koolaid conference, you know, you get to host your own conference. How would you set it up? Would you set it up in a way where maybe there were a couple of talks and then purposeful time for people to talk, or would you let there be kind of a mix for people?
I would do it a lot more like a church camp, to be honest, where you have much more communal activities. You know, it's the structure that they're going after is very academic. It's very you know, lecture heavy. What I've always loved in, you know, growing up in the church is we would have, you know, every couple years or something, you know, you'd have a youth group getaway, or you'd have, you know, just a full church getaway, and you'd go somewhere interesting out in nature. You'd have bonfires, you'd sit around, people would play on the guitar. Except with an atheist convention, obviously you could have alcohol and stuff, but group activities, you know, have lectures in the evening, maybe in the afternoon, maybe some in the morning, food, the cost can be a little bit higher, but just have fun games and stuff. There's a lot of group games and activities, and we keep seeing fractures and splintering within the atheist community. People go to these conferences and it's just like you don't feel like you're, there's a certain level of collective effervescence that you have when you're praising and worshiping and you're all dancing together. You get that at concerts, but you don't really get it in conferences when you're listening to a lecture. So I think ultimately humans are still human. We're still emotional beings. We still, like it or not, we're fairly tribalistic, and we can either strengthen our own tribe and bring people together and have some kind of emotional experiences that kind of bond us together, regardless of whether or not we have some trivial ideological differences. We can still have community that has, some engaging, fun activities that bond people together. I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a good idea in a way, because I know for me, like, the first conference I went to was ReasonCon 2 years ago, and I didn't know anybody there. So I did a lot of what you said, like the hanging out, instead of actually, I probably saw like 2 of the talks the whole time I was there. And then the second time I went, I was like, I have to see all these talks. So I went to all of them. But I do find myself sometimes at those talking to people I've known before, like I become a little more shy when I don't know people. So I think having ways to kind of break the ice. I mean, we have one way to break the ice. We know we're all atheists. And even at the Secular Saturday, it wasn't all atheists, but it was pretty close. There's at least people who are sympathetic. So you're like, okay, I'm probably okay. But I do like that idea. And it does eventually, you get kind of, one thing about Secular Saturday is all the talks were like an hour long. And I don't know, that might have been a bit too long, like maybe 45 minutes, kind of like a college class, at a certain time. You might have to get up halfway through and do some jumping jacks. So like your body.
Well, a couple ideas. Like when David Smalley was giving his talk, he had people, because he did comedy and he also did a lecture, and he had people get up and he would ask questions and they would go and stand in different groups and stuff, and he did it to make a point. But there was a lot more audience engagement. When they did the live broadcast of Dogma Debate, people were all drinking and laughing. There was an open mic. There was a 360-degree camera. People were having a good time. And I think that was awesome. That was a highlight, the live show. But a few other ideas. I've seen conferences where people have done, optional, if you want to wake up early, we're going to do, group yoga and meditation in the morning. At Imagine No Religion, Kelly Carlin got up and she did a group yoga, or not yoga, a group meditation thing where you walk around the room and you meet people and you do kind of this meditation. So there's lots of little things you can do, after parties. Even if you're not out in the wilderness, there's things that, people can do in a hotel conference room that are a lot more conducive to emotional bonding.
So was it all on the same place? Or were you like staying at a hotel where the conference was happening?
The convention center was in a hotel. I was actually at a hotel that was about 10 minutes down the road. But most of the people stayed there.
Do you have like a conference you've gone to? It's like the favorite one you've been to?
Ooh.
Are you a jaded veteran now? You've been to a few.
Imagine No Religion has to be one of my favorites. I liked Free Thought Day in California because especially the first day was the VIP sessions, and it was a lot smaller and very interactive. So like people were talking and asking questions and breaking up into small groups, and I really enjoyed that.
Well, that sounds like you found your style. Yeah, I'm intrigued by them, but being in like the Southeast, I've been to ReasonCon, and the Secular Saturday kind of popped up. I heard, is it?
Yeah, well, we actually met at ReasonCon this year.
I know. I think that was Andrew Torres. Said for me to talk to him because I was standing there with my cooler and he had beverages, but he was like, "Yeah, talk to me," which was nice of him.
I don't know if Andrew Torres even would recognize me or know who I am, though.
Yeah, I think I brought that up to him because he was like, Dr. Zach, he's a great interview. And he's like, I don't remember it. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. It's totally fine. Yeah. These things happen. And I wanted to talk, since we thought the conference pretty well, like some of the videos. Now I've watched a few and they've been great. I've enjoyed them. Try different ones. But so what made you decide to give an ironic beyond the grave hitch slap to the very slappable Dennis Prager?
Well, if you're familiar at all with Christopher Hitchens' work throughout his lifetime, especially the last 5 or 10 years of it, Prager would put out some crazy nonsense, some, religious garbage, and Hitchens was always quick to debunk it. So they debated several times. He had Christopher Hitchens on his own show a couple of times. And so there's just a massive archive of footage, and they've talked about this exact issue. They've talked about morality and can you be good without God? Can you have a moral framework without God? And I thought that Hitchens completely annihilated them every single time that they went toe to toe. So when I saw someone shot me a message that said, hey, like, you have to make a response video to Dennis Prager, then I was like, okay, if I can animate Christopher Hitchens, I can pull sound clips from, just a plethora of sources. And I couldn't turn down the opportunity. I couldn't resist. And Prager's video was already going viral. So I just kind of piggybacked on the coattails of that. I search engine optimized my video to include every single one of the same tags as his video. I made my title very similar, my description similar. So when people search for his video, or when YouTube's recommending the next video to watch, it was like shooting them to Christopher Hitchens, basically hitch slapping him with a response. And yeah, it took off. I was pleasantly surprised with that one.
Because Dennis Prager says he's Jewish, but he's got this university out, and he has like Ian Hersey Ali. He's got a lot of really well-known people kind of talking for him, but a lot of his talks are very much like, yeah, the Judeo-Christian. You notice the Jews never throw Christianity in there with them, but the Christians are like, we got to have Judeo in there because otherwise we just made this stuff up.
Well, one thing I've noticed, and you mentioned Ian Hersey Ali being on PragerU. One of the reasons for that is she's gone to a lot of liberal media sources, and they won't have her on because she's critical of Islam. And I've seen this not just with her. Yasmin Mohammed will talk about this. She's on the Secular Jihadists of the Middle East podcast. Armin Navabi and Ali Rizvi will talk about this. Sarah Hayter talks about this, where on the left, a lot of times if you're critical of Islam, they won't even give you a platform. Even if you're an ex-Muslim, even if you've, Ian Hersey Ali she had a forced marriage. She had to flee for her life to the West. She had a female genital mutilation performed on her. And so she has reason to want to bring up these issues and talk about them. And she, she's, I believe from Somalia or Tunisia? Or am I way off?
I don't know the exact origin.
But that's her.
Someone do a movie about her, or she was involved and the guy was murdered.
Yeah, it was Theo Van Gogh was killed, and they basically told her that she's next, and so she's had to travel with bodyguards ever since then. And she wrote a book called Heretic. So she has legitimate reasons to want to see reform within Islam, or to see the religion done away with. But by being critical of it, she's labeled as part of a hate group or hate speech. And I just think it's sad. So she turns to the people who give her a platform. And honestly, when someone like Dennis Prager criticizes Islam, I agree with them. I agree with them that Islam is as Sam Harris puts it, the motherlode of bad ideas. Now, I'm not criticizing the Muslim people. I want to make that distinction. I'm talking about the religion, the ideology of Islam. I think that there are many wonderful people who have, just like there are many wonderful Christians, but they're not wonderful because of Islam. They're wonderful in spite of it. And I also agree with Muslim clerics. They can be radical, crazy Wahhabists who are talking about how horrible Christianity is. And on that one issue, I'll say, yeah, you know what? Christianity is responsible for the Inquisition and the Crusades, and there's a lot of violent verses in the Old Testament. I just agree with all of them. just not about their religion. I agree with them about the other religions that, you know, it's made up, it's not true, and that the world would be better off without them.
That's true. The devotees of any religion are pretty good at finding the worst things to say about other religions, and occasionally atheists itself. We're always comparing, like, Stalin and Mao are clearly atheists, and Hitler, strangely. That one seems to be easy to debunk, but it's thrown out there quite often.
Yeah, Hitler, it's not too hard to debunk the whole atheist bit, but the whole premise of, you know, was Mao or was Pol Pot an atheist is really irrelevant to me, because, you know, atheism says absolutely nothing about someone's moral values or position. You know, you could be, you know, a communist or a capitalist. You could be, you know, a sadist. You could be a nihilist, a secular humanist, anything. You know, so if you want to talk about why religion is bad, I can say it's because they're telling you to follow blindly with blind faith. Now, what do these dictatorships all have in common? You know, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, don't question me, follow blindly. It's a very religious concept. Don't doubt, just believe. The Soviet Union was the same type of mindset. And I've never seen a government that holds to Enlightenment values, that holds to humanist ideals, that then goes and flips full circle and ends up in a horribly genocidal, human rights violating, sadistic authoritarian regime.
Well, yeah, turning it around enough, I think it probably was Hitchens, like in your video that you shared, responding to that statement about Russia. Like, Russia had a czar, and as far as I know, I believe the czar was, like, supposedly connected to God. And then it was Stalin, Lenin, I don't know who took over first, basically kept that, like, I am the head of the state and you are going to worship me. And that kind of mindset stayed the same. And man, we also have the same thing going on now with Putin, which is just crazy that poor Russian people has had to put up with a bunch of crap for hundreds and thousands of years. And it's just not right. So
when I was in Russia, they have a rule in place where the Russian president can't serve for more than 2 consecutive terms, the key word being consecutive. And so he took basically a leave of absence where not really, he switched where he went from president to prime minister, and his prime minister, Dmitry Medvedev, took over and basically ruled the country as a puppet. And then as soon as that ended, Putin came back to power. Now, there isn't a single person in Russia while I was there who didn't think that Putin wasn't pulling the strings.
Yeah, Putin's like the ultimate all-time gangster. I mean, he's just, it's incredible what's happened there, because he just I think I heard he was worth like $200 billion. Just, he kind of has the ability to do a lot of damage. And
yeah,
we as we've talked about, kind of polarizing, it seems like people might love him sometimes and then hate him other times, and I think that probably is the way he likes it. So transitioning to another video did. So did you enjoy asking Matt Slick the question that made his daughter become an atheist?
That almost sounds sadistic. I'm not sure that it was.
I'll let you explain. It's cool.
For people listening, him at Meta, the friendly atheist, had asked Rachel Slick. Matt Slick is a pastor, a famous pastor. And him at Meta had interviewed Rachel Slick, Matt's daughter, and asked her, you know, what led you away from your faith? And she had kind of one question that was really the turning point. And it was, you know, if morality is completely absolute, like math, it's just a fundamental of a constant of the universe that never changes, why is it that some things are okay in the Old Testament but not the New? That seems very counterintuitive. And so I asked Matt Slick that exact same question. I really just wanted to see his response. Now, was it trolling? You know, maybe. But his response was so canned. He just spat out this, you know.
He was prepared for that.
Almost like he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. I don't know that he knew that was the question. I don't know if he knew what I was doing. I'm pretty sure he's seen my video now, but I made an animated response to it, and I was basically saying that he was full of crap. That was the first video I made that went viral. I think it's pushing 500,000 views, but it's apparently caused some controversy. But it's, yeah.
Well, that's part of the deal, I guess. I was trying to remember his answer. It was like there were 3 parts to it, and like 2 stayed the same, but 1 changed. Like the part where you didn't wear mixed fabrics was gone, but some of the other old laws were together.
Yeah, he was saying that there were different types of laws in the Old Testament, and that, you know, some of them don't apply and some of them do, and some were done away with, but some weren't. But that still doesn't really answer the question, you know, why were the original laws there in the first place? And it wasn't just laws that, you know, oh, if you do this, then, you know, you're going to get a slap on the wrist. These were punishments that invoked the death penalty, and that would imply to me that they were fairly serious offenses.
It did seem that way, yeah. But Matt Slick, I was always wondering, like, was that his real last name? Did he change it? But since his daughter had the name, I mean, it wasn't just a stage thing, clearly.
Yeah. It's like when you have, you know, a bone surgeon whose last name is like Bones or something.
Yeah, well, having the last name of Law, often people are like, "Are you a lawyer?" It's like, no, sorry.
Yeah. What's the word for that? There's a specific name when, or a word for when your name is the same as your profession.
Don't know. Thomas Video Maker. That would be good.
Or aptronym.
Impressive. Now, we kind of covers before, you know, man, I hate when my guests come in and jump the line on questions, but since you did a video on this specifically, are people on the left responsible for the Muslim ban?
Well, yes and no. On the one hand, I do think that it played into it, and I don't like spending a lot of time in filter bubbles and echo chambers, so I do spend a fair amount of time on platforms where the alt-right tends to hang out. I like to see what they're talking about. I like to learn their arguments as well as they know them. I like to see what the trends are, and I've seen a lot of these perspectives growing where people are incredibly pissed off at social justice warriors, at modern feminism, not second wave, not, you know, an egalitarian version of feminism that most people get behind, but kind of a radical misandristic style of man hating, you know, masculinity is toxic. And when there's this pushback against that, I don't know how big, you know, that type of feminism is. They tend to get a platform. I don't know how big the ultra PC deplatforming style of the left actually is, but it's big enough to have warranted a massive outrage. And so I see people on the right, or even in the center, who are pushing back against it, and a lot of them abstained. I think a lot of people were fed up with the fact that someone like Hillary Clinton wouldn't even address Islam. And so you have, you know, in Europe right now, for a while, there's been a refugee crisis, and the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton won't even label it as Islamic. You know, they won't even they won't talk about terrorist attacks as Islamic. They're afraid to go there. And I understand why, but I think by not addressing the issue, they've kind of handed the tables over to someone like Trump, who, while his solution is absolutely batshit insane, at least he talks about it. And, you know, until we're able to put aside a lot of this PC nonsense and actually address some of these issues, I think we'll see more of that. Now, was that the determining factor that led to Trump's victory? I don't, you know, have a specific, you know, data set to back that up. I just know the trends that I observed, and I think the election was close enough that definitely played into it, and it could have been.
Yeah, it's it's hard to say what the cause. I mean, since the election was such a close thing, like there's like 500 different things that could have affected it, but there is there just seems to be such super pushback against the left, like acting like college students who are protesting or doing the same stuff as it seems like the extreme right is currently residing in the White House, so they got a little more power than they did before, and people were jumping up and getting really excited about it. But yeah, it's like, I mean, for me at this point, it's like labels don't mean anything. If someone calls someone an SJW, I need more input because I don't know what they're really talking about.
Yeah.
They might be upset about one person in particular or one thing in particular, or they might actually have something. Because, yeah.
Well, and honestly, it comes down to we have a poor definition of terms. Because if you were simply to ask me, you know, do you care about social justice? Do you think that, you know, if someone is black, that their life matters too? I'd say, hell yeah, it does. Like, of course, you know, and that's, I think, where most people who aren't, you know, insane or white supremacists or white nationalists or whatever would agree on. But there's such a poor definition of terms where, you know, if you were then to ask me, you know, because you're a cis white male, then, you know, do you think that you have any place talking about any of these issues? I'd say, yeah, you know, you don't have to, you know, you can be an expert in a particular topic. You can learn about a topic. You can go on, you know, to the streets and actually, you know, physically engage without necessarily, I can't control my skin color, but I can learn about a topic enough to be able to hopefully make some progress in the conversation. But finding that distinction right now, we don't have terms adequately in place to, and maybe there are, maybe, you know, maybe your viewers can help me out, you know, if there's specific definitions, but I don't think that the majority of people know what they are.
Yeah, I don't know it. When someone attacks feminism, like you were talking about kind of third wave, which is a little more known, but it does still tend to go toward the extremists. Like, well, yeah, I think in most cases you're against extremists unless it's like extreme people who like cake or something,
or like extreme forgiveness, extreme love, you know.
Yeah, extreme hug person. That they're very popular at conferences. Oh, gotta say, shout out Callie and Celeste. Magic Science Vaginas have been officially installed. That's pretty awesome. That happened. Callie Wright of the Gay Youth Manifesto.
Oh, is she watching?
And her partner Celeste. Well, she just had like her surgery. I believe it was today.
Oh, okay.
They're both in San Francisco having the transition surgery at the same time. So it's pretty awesome because they're pretty much like live Facebooking like on the other person's account. And that's been fun. Yeah, the term, I know I've had people attack feminism and it always seems to be a little bit straw man-y, and you definitely want to get a little further because if you're attacking something like that, it's like you're, in a way, you feel like you're attacking all women, but you know you have to be careful. But it's like you mentioned in your video about the Muslim ban. You're talking about, yeah, you have to be careful when you're talking about Islam, but if you're criticizing religion versus criticizing people, that should be acceptable.
Yeah. Well, and I would agree with you that there is a lot of straw manning going on. It definitely takes place on both sides. I've seen people in the atheist community who say, you know, oh yeah, I'm in favor of feminism, and they see it as, you know, because the terms aren't properly defined. They're like, oh, of course I'm in favor of equality for women, you know, equal opportunity and everything. But they're suddenly thrown under the bus and they are attacked and targeted and whatnot. That doesn't mean that there isn't some extreme craziness going on in the name of feminism. I don't know how many people would identify with that who self-identify as feminists, but you know, it's the same with people on the right who they might identify as a conservative and they may be fiscally conservative, politically conservative, but they're not socially, you know, they're not religious, they're not Republican when it comes to issues like gay marriage or abortion or any kind of social issue. And yet they're still lumped into this one group and they're thrown under the bus and they're demonized by oftentimes the atheist movement just because maybe their view on society and culture, sanctity of particular groups is a little bit different. And I think we should have a little bit more diversity of opinion and views, and that should be okay, because in the free marketplace of ideas, we're not going to help ourselves by, just silencing any kind of dissent.
True. Now you have a pretty crazy following on YouTube. So have you had to deal with like negativity online, and how do you kind of handle that? Do you really look closely at comments, since there's going to be some horrible stuff in there?
I get some crap. That's to be expected, just because it's YouTube. Most of my feedback, honestly, if it's a video that really takes off and goes viral, then I'll have creationists stumble across it, and maybe they'll be like, this isn't the real Christianity, and it's kind of a no true Scotsman fallacy. It's like, okay, well, can you show me exactly what your definition of true Christianity is, or is it one of the 10,000 different variations of denominations of Christianity that it's hard for me to disprove all of them at once? But I don't get a whole lot of hate from within the atheist community. When I do, it kind of hurts a little bit more, because it's like, these are my own that are coming after me. But most of my feedback's positive. I think one of the reasons for that is like, I'll say straight up, like, if I don't understand something, or I don't know all the details about something, I try to approach it with nuance. I try to approach it objectively. I try to, but with an open mind. And, I think people are forgiving if you're humble about something. If I say, this is what, SJWs all represent, and this is what all feminists represent, and this is what every single person on, right-wing person is like, I think I get a lot more hate. But I try to, a lot of times we deal in black and white, and it's more, most issues are some shade of gray.
And yet you thrive on YouTube. I'm very impressed. I think there's a lot of things that way these days.
It's a fine tightrope that you walk, but I mean, if you're bringing positivity and love and curiosity, and you're willing to explore, and you're open and honest about, I'm not afraid to admit if I'm wrong, and if I get a fact wrong in an episode that I do, I'll pin it. I'll be the first to pin it to the top of my comments section, and I think people respect that.
So do you think at the moment that the atheist movement is in crisis, or is this just something to be expected when you have so many people who have a lot of strong opinions?
I mean, who says that it's one unified movement?
I think it seems like people who are attacking it say it is, or maybe people want it to be, but I don't know why anybody would want. I mean, I get it in terms of like, in theory, if atheists all get together, maybe we could have some, political clout. But otherwise, probably not. Well,
I mean, there's about 20% of the American population that identifies as non-religious and don't adhere to a personal god or deity. But only like 5% identify as a convinced atheist. And that's, I think there's a lot of people who are atheists who don't identify as it because they have some conception about what an atheist is. And there's a lot of negative stereotypes and the negative connotation that's carried over from the Cold War. They're seen as godless communists, the evil other, those, heathens, and we're, the religious Christian nation. Even if they don't think Christianity is good, they still are hesitant to identify as atheists, I think largely for that reason. But within the atheist community, these splinterings and fracturings, I think that's inevitable as a group grows. And we can't expect to have some level of homogeny, especially over something as arbitrary as the existence of God. That, like I said, that says nothing about your character. So you can have humanist groups that come together like Oasis or Sunday Assembly that meet on Sundays similar to churches, and they have humanist ideals. But there are atheists who aren't humanists. There are atheists who aren't skeptical. There are, who believe in, reptilian overlords. And until we realize that, I think we're going to be hurting a lot of cats trying to, have one atheist movement. But I think it's inevitable, just like churches have splintered into thousands of denominations. And as they've gotten big enough to be able to accommodate that, then they've thrived and they can point to themselves as the religious Christian voting bloc, but it's not one lump. And I think that's what's kind of inevitable. humans tend to be tribalistic, and we could come together and acknowledge that there's going to be splinters and fractures, but really still have support and love and community. But we have to have certain ideals in place. Now, I'm not saying that it has to be like, oh, atheism plus or whatever else, but I think if you look at most of the conferences that exist in the States that are kind of atheist conferences, most of them will be a skeptics conference or a humanist conference, or a, they're kind of around some other unifying factor, rather than just, hey, let's all get together and really not believe in God super hard.
Super hard. Super duper hard. We're getting toward the end of the hour, but we can't finish without basically saying thanks, and also have Thomas tell everybody where they can find you. All the links will be included in the show notes so they can track you down and check out your videos.
My YouTube channel is Holy Koolaid, youtube.com/Holy Koolaid. And my Twitter handle is @Holy Koolaid. As well on Facebook, it's Holy Koolaid's the page. But you can find all my links, all my content, transcripts for my videos and everything on holykoolaid.com.
Yeah, it's sometimes like I interview somebody and then like their Twitter handle is some weird, like their name backwards, and you're like, come on, man. Branding. You got the branding clearly.
Like it's QRX59C*4.
Yeah, that's my call sign. You took it. So I decided to skip second live read because I didn't really have anything cool and clever, but I did want to say, for people who want to support the show, there are people who do support this show. Bobby, Hugh, Teote, Marissa, so No Religion Required, Inciting Incident, go check them out. But you can support this show at patreon.com/Zachrilege, ZACHRILEGE. If I can spell it after 2 beers, you can too. You can follow me on Twitter, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all hate mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. So thanks again to Thomas for being on tonight, and for all listeners and watchers, except for that random commenter. Stay safe, and if you need the chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you're not alone. Reach out. Let's chat and get that human connectedness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical. I love all y'all. Good night, and